Alright, welcome to Unit 5, Video 1. We are now starting the Civil War. The question that I want you to keep in the back of your brain when we go over the information for this unit is, why did the Civil War cause change? Or even, how did the Civil War cause change? And to answer this question, we need to think about all of the U.S. history that we've learned about up to this point, and what the United States looks at like after we see what happens in this unit. So to start off, we have to do some background and some causes, because there's a lot of time between where we last left off and the beginning of the Civil War. Now, the president that we last left off with was President Andrew Jackson. Now, Andrew Jackson is notable in U.S. history for all the wrong reasons, but what we remember him most for is his treatment of the Native Americans. Now, where we need to go from here is, Jackson not only treated the Native Americans poorly by forcibly removing them from their land, but the reason that he did that, if we remember, is his supporters, which were Southerners and Westerners, were demanding more land to make more money. The actions that we need to talk about with Jackson right now are not far off of that. So Jackson, during his presidency, took on the National Bank. Now, we remember the National Bank was created by Alexander Hamilton to deal with the debt crisis in the United States. Now, we've had to recharter or repass that National Bank more times, because they do expire. It is not a permanent institution in the government. Congress needs to reapprove it to allow for change over time, and for the government to look at, do we really need this bank right now? Do we always need it? So during Jackson's presidency was when we saw the chartering for the National Bank come up. Now, Jackson's supporters, like we said, were in the South, and the Southerners do not support the National Bank because they believed that the National Bank supported industry and really favored business, and therefore the North. So Jackson, to gain support of his followers, of his supporters, to keep him in good favor, he will veto the National Bank. Now, without the National Bank, we have no regulation of the debt, we have no regulation of the money supply, we have no regulation of loans being given out at the state and local level, because there is no federal control. So when Jackson leaves politics in 1836 and his successor, Martin Van Buren, who was his Secretary of State, becomes president, Van Buren is immediately met with the Panic of 1837. During this panic, we're going to see that inflation rises, which means the value of paper money goes down, which is why paper money was not accepted for land purchases, because paper money had no value. During this panic, we're going to see a bank crisis, because the banks were heavily unregulated. Farmers are going to be losing land because they cannot pay their debt down, and industrial workers are going to be taking pay cuts because of the financial crisis. Industry isn't able to take loans out, they aren't able to get a hold of money, so they pay their workers less to make more money. The Panic of 1837, happening in Van Buren's presidency, is going to get him the nickname Van Ruin, because this is the worst depression that the U.S. had ever experienced to date, and that is all related to the vetoing of the National Bank. In the election of 1840, we are going to have the Whig Party. The Whig Party is going to run William Henry Harrison, a war hero from the Battle of Tippecanoe. If you remember this battle, this is where we fought the Native Americans who were trying to get together and create an armed resistance against the United States. William Henry Harrison defeated the Native Americans at Tippecanoe. He will be remembered for that battle, and he will run as a Whig Party candidate alongside John Tyler, who was a Democrat. Their party slogan for running in this election was Tippecanoe and Tyler too. Remember, America loves a war hero. Van Buren is going to run for the Democratic Party, but people associate Van Buren with the depression that the nation is going through, so he loses. The Whigs are going to win with President Harrison. Unfortunately, Harrison, about a month after he gets elected, gets pneumonia and dies in 1841. Now, he was a Whig, but he ran with John Tyler, who was a Democrat. That's the way you get more votes. You get votes from both parties to have candidates from two different sides. Now, the plan here was to have William Henry Harrison running the show for the entire presidency, but he gets pneumonia and he dies. And his vice president, John Tyler, becomes president at this point. He is going to have an uphill battle. The Democrats don't like Tyler because he ran with a Whig Party candidate. The Whigs don't like Tyler because he's a Democrat. So Tyler becomes known as the man without a party, and his presidency is very unremarkable. He gets little to nothing done. In 1844, we are going to see President Tyler try to run again, but he is going to lose to the Democratic candidate, President Polk, which we will get back to in just 1 minute. What we need to know before we get into the causes of the Civil War and what really brings us to fight against our own countrymen is this idea of sectionalism. Now, if I asked you what nationalism was, you would say pride in one's country. Sectionalism is the same thing, but it is pride in your section of the country. So it is to be loyal or support a particular section of the nation. And the sections that we have right now, we have the North, which is heavy in industry. We have the South being ruled by agriculture. Remember, Eli Whitney's invention of the cotton gin gives us King Cotton of the South. And then we have the West, where their economy is really to be determined. We're going to see the economy of the West change very much, but the West represents this idea of the American dream, that as America expands under this idea of manifest destiny, that it is our job, it is our duty to expand from one side of the United States all the way to the other side, from ocean to shining ocean. People go out there with the intent of owning land, building their own wealth, and kind of doing it on their own, which is the American dream. So the West, while we don't really have a set economy there, it is housed by the American dream. These economic differences are going to define sectionalism. That's what breaks us into these three different sections and really causes people to have pride in their section. So what other sectional issues do we see? First, we see the Tariff of 1816. Remember, tariffs are taxes on imported goods. That makes foreign-made goods more expensive because we have to pay a tax on them. This encourages people to buy American-made products. Now, the North, of course, is going to love tariffs because that makes their goods the ones that people want to purchase. It is this encouraging of American manufacturing. But the South is going to see it as a way of hurting their economy, because once we pass a tariff, other countries pass tariffs as well, which means they're taxing our goods. If you're a farmer, they export a lot of their product, and if they're exporting and it's being taxed in other places, that hurts their business. So the South will see a tariff as an attack on their way of life, where the North is going to see it as a direct help to them. The Tariff of 1816 is going to come up again, and this begins those sectional issues. The Second Bank of the United States is going to be a major issue between the different sections, because the southern states will see it as a help to the northern industry, and they don't see it as a help to farmers. Plus, the southern states are going to favor state governments, where the north favor federal governments, and the bank is going to be seen as a flex of the federal government's muscle. The American system is going to be a heavy point of contention or argument between the different sections because the American system encouraged a protective tariff, it encouraged the second bank, and it encouraged a tax program. And you know, nobody likes taxes. So these are going to be the issues that really pit the North against the South, and it makes it look like the North is being favored by the federal government where the South is not. So the South becomes very resentful against the federal government, which we need to keep in mind moving forward. Territorial expansion is going to be a huge argument between the North and the South, but we got to figure out how the heck do we get all of these gains. So first, Texas is going to gain independence from Mexico in 1836. Once this happens, Mexico warns the United States, you cannot annex or add Texas to the United States. If you do, we will go to war. But during the War for Independence, the Texan War for Independence, the United States is going to help Texas break away from Mexico. Now, we can argue whether it was for our own favor or because we were trying to help out a friend, but the United States helps Texas gain its independence. And the reason that Texas needed help is they were not as strong as their Mexican ruler. And that was represented at the Alamo, which was a standoff between the Texans and the Mexican forces. After that, the United States is going to lend Texas a hand to break away. Many Americans also lived in Texas, so the United States kind of sees it as our duty to help Texas. Once Texas does gain independence, though, it will remain independent as the Lone Star State. Um, but we will eventually go to war with Mexico in the Mexican American War to fight for the territory in the orange that you see on the map there, and that really pushes the United States to expand all the way to the Pacific coast. We gained lands all the way out to California in the Mexican American War. And we're going to go to war, the Mexican American War, under President Polk. President Polk becomes president in 1844. He really pushed for the idea of manifest destiny, the United States gaining all of that territory to the Pacific coast, including the Oregon territory. President Polk is going to run on the slogan 5440 or fight. 5440 is the latitude line that Polk wanted us to gain territory up to. The territory that he was speaking about, the Oregon Territory, belonged to the British. Polk had kind of made a vow to go to war against the British, which he knew was never going to happen. We could never win the war against the British again for that territory. Add on to that we were in the Mexican American War at the same time, and Polk does not go to war with the British, but we do gain the Oregon Territory through a deal with the British. We split it, not at the 5440 line, but at the line that you can see up here, which becomes the top of the United States. Oregon is going to enter as a free state, meaning that there is no slavery in that territory. Now, once we get the Mexican secession from the Mexican American War, this territory in the orange here, the question then becomes, what kind of states do those enter the Union as? Are they going to be free without slavery, or are they going to be slave with slavery? So, as we expand, the differences between the North and the South are really highlighted. The North is going to take on the view of abolishing or getting rid of slavery. The Northerners are going to see slavery as a moral evil. Remember the Second Great Awakening, where religion became more prevalent, and there were women involved in the Second Great Awakening, there were African Americans involved in the Second Great Awakening, and the idea of equality is being pushed again. So this is gonna spark an interest in the North to be more moral, and slavery is not moral. The South is going to rely on slavery for their economy. Remember, if you start a business, the most expensive piece that you will have is labor. And slavery was free labor. So the South was making pure profit. And they are going to rely on that to keep building their economy. And without it, they don't know how to survive. Without slavery in the South, they would experience high unemployment because people can't pay everyone to work on the farms. So the South is going to say we have to keep slavery. There is no way for us to navigate our economy without it. And when it comes to territorial expansion, what do we do with the lands in the West? Well, the South is going to encourage slavery to expand, where the North is going to discourage slavery from expanding. The tensions between the states, the North versus the South, all balance on this idea of, is it the states' rights to determine the status of new states, or is it the federal government's right to regulate slavery? The states, the South is going to be on the side of states' rights and say it is each state's right to choose if they want to have slavery or not. The North is going to argue for the federal government to regulate slavery. And this is really going to pit the two different sections of the United States against each other. For years, we have had a balance between the slave states and the free states in Congress. As we expand west and we start to add new states to the Union, that balance could be upset. Now, the reason that balance is so important is if we get one more slave state added to the Union, that means they get representation in Congress. That representation in Congress could allow for laws to be passed to keep slavery if we enter more slave states, or if we enter more free states and those free states get congressional representation, then laws could be passed to completely get rid of slavery. So when I talk about this balance between the free and the slave states, this is what I mean here. We have to be very careful when we add more states to the Union, what they will become and what their representation will decide. The North is going to experience an industrial boom. This causes an increase in immigration within the United States, immigrants coming from Europe to seek out that American dream. The South is going to be heavily dependent on agriculture and slave labor. They will experience a stunted economy. It's not growing. They have gotten all they can out of agriculture and out of the cotton industry. It's not that they weren't making money, but they kind of just hit a plateau, and they're just staying the same. There isn't new inventions. There isn't more land being discovered. They've kind of done all of the growing that they possibly can. So tensions are going to build between the political parties as well. The political parties that we have in this lecture that we're talking about here are the Whig parties, which is mostly going to be the northern industrial supporters, versus the Democrats, which is very southern agricultural supporters. The Whig Party will later become the Republican Party, so the name just switches, but the area and what they support remains the same. Tomorrow, we will cover the beginnings of war. Don't forget about your homework tonight. And any questions on the lecture, please let me know. Have a great day, guys.